Welcome to our June 8th edition of Saturday Simulcast. Brian Neubert and I will be talking Purdue basketball. That probably is not a big surprise to anyone based on what's going on here in the relatively recent term and what's ahead for Purdue. I want to thank the Purdue Union Club Hotel. All the work that Brian Neubert's done promoting it has helped. This is a little bit tongue-in-cheek here, but they are the only hotel to be on the Travel and Leisure Top 500 list. Just came out last month. And Brian,
I'm taking complete credit for that, by the way.
I know you are.
That picture I tweeted out of that gigantic piece of bacon, like it was like a brisket. I've never had a piece of bacon that big. That did it. Clearly, the people who decide on that list saw that and they said, you know what? We got to go with the Union Club Hotel at Purdue on this list.
That and all the people, I had a lot to do with the readers poll too, but and I've had that bacon too as well. It's almost like pork belly, and it is fantastic. If you had 2 or 3 of those, you'd be set for life.
I could barely eat one, and I can eat anything.
I know. They're good. That, of course, at the 811 Bistro, I happened to have a drink with my lovely wife on a couple nights ago at the Boiler Up Bar and ordered the blue cheese wedge salad that comes with that, and man, that was good. So we're getting ourselves hungry as we record this a little bit before dinner time on Friday. But Brian, obviously, you're getting next week. Purdue men's basketball starts its practice, or summer practice, but the big news being Thursday afternoon. It became known that Canon Catchings was going to be let out of his letter of intent by Matt Painter. And you've written about this on the site in terms of talking about what the ramifications of all this is. But now having 24 hours to ponder it, and I know you've pondered other things, but what's your take on all of this?
I think, it was kind of an up and down journey between Purdue and Canon Catchings all along. A very strange recruitment, where there have been a number of moments where this was very tenuous and Purdue had to either talk him out of things or just wait them out until they just went away. You get to a point where it's 5 days before a guy shows up in class. You think you're good. But this was something that has happened before, and it just kind of went away a few times. I think he has been very indecisive about what he's actually wanted. He has been very emotional. He's been very impulsive. It's part of being a kid, But also, I think there are some things unique to this particular kid where he's just been. He's had good days. He's had bad days. The bad days he maybe overreacts to sometimes, and there was the thing a while back where he actually on the phone with Purdue decommitted. And no one would have known about that had he not changed his Instagram profile and fans noticed. That sort of thing happens. That sort of thing happens with teenage males, teenage females, probably. It's part of being young. It just often doesn't play out publicly like that kind of sort of did. So I guess he calls Matt Painter the other night, and this sort of profiles as a cold feet sort of situation here, and just wanted to talk about a lot of the same things about his college career that, Purdue's been with him many, many times. And he said he wanted out of his letter of intent. And, don't think for a second that, Painter couldn't have just said all the right things during that phone call and waited this out, and it would have passed and he would have been at Purdue here next week. But there comes a point in time here where you've done this once, you've done this twice, you've done this 3 times. Chances are this isn't going to be the last time. And the reality is, this isn't me laundering the story for Purdue or anything like that.
Understood.
This is just simple reality. If this is going to happen again, which there's every reason to believe it will because it's happened so many times before, would you rather have it happen now, or would you rather happen in February? Purdue has had great stability in its program. It has great chemistry, and that is part of what has made it really good. Matt Painter has been very good at allowing the recruiting process to kind of be the filter that kind of sorts through the problems before they ever become problems. And the one thing he has never wanted to put his program at risk of, this is why players redshirt. This is why he doesn't always max out his scholarships, even though he did this year. Is he doesn't want that guy at the end of the bench who's not happy, who's bringing everyone else down and becoming a distraction, sapping people's energy, things like that. And Canon Catchings, for whatever reason, whatever it is about his personality, has been that guy. He is often the guy at the end of the bench who is, not engaged, who is getting called for an inordinate number of technical fouls. I'm not trashing the kid here because he's not coming to Purdue. I'm just saying this has been demonstrable about Canon Catchings. There is something about his personality that is just very, very high and low. And people smarter than me, wherever he ends up, hopefully can get him the proper support, the proper, if he needs help, the proper help, whatever it might be. But he has a good support system at home.
Yeah.
I think that they have really tried to work him through some things. Overtime Elite down in Atlanta was sort of a step toward trying to accelerate him striking out on his own and perhaps coming of age a little bit. Um, he's still in a place where you just didn't know what was coming next necessarily. That's part of being young. It just is for all of us. But I do think there are some things unique to this player in that regard, and I think the people around him would even admit that in a moment of honesty. I think Purdue did everything they could. They stood by him through a lot of this stuff, but it just came to a point where he said he wanted out, and Purdue just wasn't going to fight it anymore. They weren't going to keep, kind of. I don't want to say playing that game because I don't want to. I don't want to belittle it. But chances are, had Purdue talked to him the next day, everything would have been normal. That first decommitment that I had to write about because it became public knowledge just kind of went away, like it never happened. And for all we know, this very thing might have just kind of disappeared into the ether had Purdue just ignored it. Um, but as I said before, if it's going to happen this time, it's going to happen again. So better to just uh, maybe not deal with it from here on out, as opposed to being at the mercy of it, kind of moving forward. What does Purdue lose in the short term? Canon Catchings is really talented. He's really talented. He's got a ton of upside. He's a guy who could have been a really good college player, might still be a really good college player, um, maybe a great player. I see that personally for him more in like year 3 than year 1, year 2. That's my opinion. I know he's on NBA radar already because when you're tall, long, interchangeable, and can shoot, and you're skilled, you're going to be on those lists. Um, whether he is in a place emotionally, maturity wise, to deliver on that right away, I have no idea. But Purdue has a good team this year. Purdue could have a great team the year after that. And how he would have factored into that, chances are it would have been more like a Miles Coleman, where you have your moments, but they're not as consistent. You're not stepping right onto this team and starting. You're not stepping right into this team and taking over as the dominant player over a Braden Smith, a Fletcher Lawyer, a Trey Kaufman-Wren. You're not going to be the team's leading scorer. Most likely, you're going to be more of a complementary player, stuff like that. That's part of the process for a lot of great players. But whether that was necessarily his expectation coming in, that I can't speak to, but it stands to reason to suggest that you go to Overtime Elite, you're around some USA basketball events, you go to a lot of these all-star games, and you're surrounded by dudes who are fast-tracking themselves to the NBA. They're all talking about where they're going to be next year, the year after that. They're talking about how much money they're making, stuff like that. And maybe it changes the way you perceive yourself a little bit. And um, maybe the whole paradigm of things changes. So long story short, what happened the other day was not off brand in this particular recruitment. A recruitment that, by the way, ended or didn't end, resolved itself early very quickly because Catchings didn't give people a chance to recruit him really. He got offered by Purdue. He visited, he made a couple other visits to simply check boxes for his family who wanted him to see more than one school. And then when like Michigan State and Ohio State and a bunch of other people wanted to offer him and they called him to offer him, they couldn't get him to return their calls because he just didn't want to deal with it. He didn't want to talk to people on the phone, things like that. He didn't want to go through the process. And whether he had taken more of a active role in being recruited would have changed this outcome, I have no idea. My guess is probably not, but here they are going their separate ways. I think Purdue's fine. I think Canon Catchings in time can be fine. My guess is he stays at Overtime Elite, works another year down there, tries to get drafted next year. We will see. But this wasn't somebody tampering with him. This wasn't NIL. This was simply a young person bound to go off to college, seemingly having, cold feet might not be the right term, but recurring concerns that have manifested themselves all throughout this process over the last few years. So that's kind of what I know, which is, kind of a lot, but kind of not all that much.
Yeah. Well, and embedded in several answers to questions there. So that's good to know and good, well said.
Yeah, how long was that answer?
Oh, the
Do we have
longest
like a
one in
timer
history.
here?
Yeah, it might have been 4 and 5 minutes, but it's all right. We're not. You're getting paid, but you're getting paid by. I don't know what you're getting paid by. Maybe by the
I get
answer.
paid?
Maybe, yeah, you did. You got. Yeah, you should have gotten your paycheck today. By
When?
the way. Yeah, I did. I deposited Purdue Federal today. You're all set. So make sure you
I
check
had
your
no idea I
account.
got paid. Where's all this money been going all these years?
I don't know. It's maybe that trust fund thing. I'm not sure. All right. Obviously, practice starts. Summer's version of practice starts on Tuesday, I believe it is. And you and Mike Carmen will be out there watching that. But tell me, just somewhat in light of the Catchings deal, but really not, because like you said, there's a heck of a lot of returning talent. Cam Heide, even Brian Waddell may. I mean, I don't know. This can provide. Heidi's was already in the rotation, going to be a huge part next year. Does this doesn't change this anything? Purdue's got a very good basketball team coming back. What are you going to start watching for as you watch Purdue on Tuesday?
Well, to stay with Catchings real quick,
Yeah,
if Purdue was ever going to say, "Hey, you're coming in here," and I'm not saying Catchings asked for this.
yeah,
I think it got kind of speculated about in the court of public opinion yesterday that specific demands were made, promises were asked for, and Matt Painter's not a promise maker. I know I used the word promise a few times, and maybe I shouldn't have, but if Canon Catchings there was any thought that he was going to step in and start right away, or be that leading scorer type of guy simply because he has 4 or 5 stars next to his name, anything like that, simply because he has drawn outsized attention in the digital discussion world because he's such a high profile player and because there's been this kind of underlying story. That wasn't reality because Camden Heide and Miles Colvin laid a groundwork last year on an elite team for much more to come for both of those guys. I think Heide is going to start off tentatively as Purdue's 4-man to get him on the floor to maybe play a little bit differently. Colvin is going to go from playing a few minutes a game, not playing at all for a few weeks, to being a starter and a guy they're going to run plays for. They're going to need to score. They're going to need to defend, things like that. Those guys' time is now. Brian Waddell is going to have a chance. Canon Catchings or no Canon Catchings, he's going to have another opportunity to kind of reset things for himself. Either at the 3, the 2, the wing, whatever it might be. But he should not be written off yet. Jakari Harris, CJ Cox, the 2 freshmen, those are multi-positional guys in the backcourt, but also maybe on the wing. Fletcher Lawyer obviously is back as your 2, but also there's some interchangeability there between positions. Canon Catchings would have worked his way to the 4. That is where you're playing Heidi. That is where you are going to play Trey Kaufman-Renn some still. He is going to start as your 5-man. I think as of right now, it's day 1 of practice. So
yeah, I was going to
what
say,
occurs on day 1 of practice and what occurs on day 30 of practice could be 2 very different things.
Yeah.
But tentatively to start off, Trey Kaufman-Renn is going to be your quote unquote center. Doesn't mean he has to play like Zach Edey. Doesn't mean he has to be Zach Edey, but he's going to be your 5-man. That is the position he's going to play. Camden Heidi is going to be a small ball type of 4. Miles Colvin's going to be your 3. Fletcher Lawyer is going to be your 2. Braden Smith is probably your front runner to be your starting point guard at this point. But there's going to be a derby. There's going to be a derby there, obviously. I'm obviously joking. If any of you don't have a sarcasm muscle in your body, that was a joke.
Yeah.
Don't aggregate that.
I even got it. Mm-hmm.
So Trey Kaufman-Renn is going to play the 5, but he's also still going to play the 4 some. You've got Caleb First, still in that 4-5 mix. So where Canon Catchings was going to fit in, there was no obvious, you just write him into this place the way you did with Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer 2 years ago, the way you kind of did with Miles Colvin last year. But what you're looking for here as practice starts is everything. Because as similar as you are to last year with Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, Trey Kaufman-Renn, and a couple other guys, I got to stop saying 6 freshmen now. You got 5 scholarship freshmen coming in. You can't have that many scholarship guys coming in as freshmen and not need them for something. There's no Zach Edey anymore. Perhaps you've heard. So they're going to have to recreate themselves to a certain extent offensively. They're going to have to recreate themselves to a certain extent defensively. What that's going to look like on day 1, again, is something that could look entirely different on day 30. But you're going to have to play more through Trey Kaufman-Renn. You're going to need more from Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer as scorers. Miles Colvin is going to have to pick up some scoring load. You're going to have to scheme some offensive ways to use Camden Heidi, put him in positions to succeed. Defensively, you got to stop the dribble. You aren't going to have that rim protection anymore that you had with Zach Edey, unless Daniel Jacobson steps in, which won't be a story for day 1 because I don't think he'll be here yet.
No.
But I think rebounding is going to be huge. What you find out in that regard in practice, you don't. But you might have to scheme some things this year to just have more bodies around the basket because you don't have one body that's doing the job of like 4, like you did with Zach Edey before. So that's a long way to say basically everything. This is a very, very similar team, but a profoundly different one too. They're going to have new identities at both ends of the floor. They're going to need guys to really make a jump from year 1 to year 2. They're going to have freshmen really emerge right away into winning players. And I'm looking at you, Daniel Jacobson, and I'm looking at you, Jakari Harris, above everyone else. Those are the 2 guys who really jump out to me. Daniel Jacobson is fascinating because this is a guy who was a 2025 recruit who you were able to get in 2024. It stood to reason to suggest, hey, he's moved up a year, even though he's still in his age group. What he's doing with USA Basketball right now gives him the look of a player who can help you right now at a time when you don't have, unless Will Berg really makes a step forward, which he very well may.
Yeah.
All possibilities are on the table here for everyone. But Daniel Jacobson is 7'3". He can block shots. He can shoot the basketball. He can be a good offensive piece. What's to say he doesn't come in and change the way you're looking at this team right now. Maybe he's your center. Trey Kaufman-Renn moves back to the 4, or Trey Kaufman-Renn stays at the 5. Jacobson sees major minutes at center, pushes Trey Kaufman-Renn back to the 4 more than you might think right now. Jacobson is just a really, really fascinating player for this team now and obviously into the future. Jakari Harris and CJ Cox are both defensive-minded guards at a time when you need depth at guard. You need 2 viable backups in your backcourt that you might not otherwise have returning. Those guys, Jacobson, Harris, Cox, 3 freshmen, you really got to keep an eye on here during practice this summer.
Cox,
so
yeah,
that's a lot of stuff. This is a really big summer for Purdue.
Yeah, and it'd be fun. And if you sit back and just watch him, see what Matt Painter and staff decide to put together and how they put this team together and what they see. And like you said, it may change it will change. I'm almost guaranteed.
It will change.
Practice 1 to practice 30, and even by the time we get to November, when Purdue's 24-25 season will commence, and that's going to be an interesting thing to watch as well. Leadership is an interesting part of this too. You've got certainly a guy like Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer and some experience and Trey Kaufman-Renn, even Caleb First, depending on who emerges there. Is this totally Braden Smith's team in your view, or how do you look at the leadership quotient on this team?
Well, I have a bad track record of gauging leadership in the summer because the last time I said leadership should be a real strength for Purdue, it was this fatal flaw.
Yeah.
That was the No-Gel Eastern Matt Harms year. That was a complete disaster. But I was wrong about that. My logic was sound, but I don't think I'm wrong about this now. I think Braden Smith is the sort of guy who's going to take this whole team around its neck and really kind of will it to be something more. I think Fletcher Lawyer is going to be a really good leader for Purdue. I think he stayed on campus all May, and I think he's going to be asked to do more, and I think he's very capable of doing more. I think Mason Gillis is going to be missed. I think Zach Edey's going to be missed, but I think Trey Kaufman-Renn is a guy who is really focused on the mental side of basketball, who's really going to take it upon himself to be a more vocal guy, who's going to set a great example with his effort and is already, I know this for a fact because I just talked to the people he's been working with about this, but he is a very, very cerebral, process-oriented, cerebral guy who is already thinking about what can I do to be a better leader? How do I help make everybody else better? He's working with various professionals on becoming a more effective leader because he knows that Purdue needs that and he's capable of doing it. I think that one of the most important things for Purdue's program right now is all of the stuff, all the intangible stuff, all the underlying motivators and driving forces that just took Purdue to the NCAA title game. That stuff has to be passed down to the people coming into the program now. It has to have rubbed off on all the guys coming back, and it has to be passed from them to all of these new guys coming into the program. And I think I thought it was a really positive sign after the NCAA title game that Miles Coleman was really pissed off that Purdue lost. I think Trey Kaufman-Renn was irate that they lost. Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer obviously are really competitive dudes. And I think that sort of mentality just has to be a consistent thing for Purdue kind of from here on out to get back to where they were this year. When you look at where they fell off that year, I just mentioned before, that was the issue. You went from that senior class of P.J. Thompson, Isaac Haas, Vince Edwards, Dakota Mathias, some other really important guys. Rafael Davis came before that, and it just fell off. And, I hate using the word culture because it sounds like such a buzzword, something just people just say. But really, you had a cultural slippage there that got fixed when Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer showed up, and Zach Edey emerging into not only a great player, but an awesome leader. and Mason Gillis being part of that as well. I'm probably forgetting somebody unintentionally, but I think now is the time kind of for Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, and Trey Kaufman-Renn, especially highlighting those three guys to really be important players for this team. And from a leadership perspective, not that they haven't been already, but now is their time to take ownership for this team. This isn't Zach Edey's team anymore. And I thought they were kind of co-owners anyway before, but now the title has officially been signed over from Zach Edey to Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer.
Yeah. And an important
I want to say
thing,
something too. Purdue had awesome walk-ons last year. Carson Barrett was a great leader for this team. Chase Martin was a great leader for this team. Those guys are going to be missed too. And keeping Carson Barrett on staff, I think was a great move by Purdue. But I think Purdue's in a good spot here from a leadership perspective.
Yeah, Chase is going to get a chance to play for his dad, it looks like, in his sixth year, as I understand it, or fifth year, I should say. And good for him. And yeah, those guys were special guys, to say the least. All right. We appreciate your commentary, as
That's
always.
It?
That's it. Unless you got something else,
three questions. You asked me like three questions.
That was 30 minutes of time. So, so you have.
I have real problems. I have just. I was listening to a podcast the other day about Bob. It was Bob Costas talking about Bill Walton.
Yeah.
And God love Bill Walton, but he could go off on real tangents, go off in all sorts of different directions, and they're talking about fitting into certain time slots. And I'm just thinking, how do people even do that? Like, I try to bring nuance to this. I try to bring detail to this stuff. And if you ever ask me to just keep a question within like 2 minutes, I couldn't do it because I'm a degenerate and I just sit here and I just talk and I figure, hey, people might as well record it. And anyway.
Well, I don't have any comment on that.
Ask me more questions. Let's stay here all day.
I do think the passing of Bill Walton, I will say, kind of hit me hard, just because as crazy as he was and interesting as he was, it was interesting to see the all of the commentary on him and all the outpouring of really emotion with it. From all of the basketball world and a very, very unique character, as you are as well, my friend. So
Bob Costas told a story about how Bill Walton would end all of his text messages to people he cared about. Thank you for my life.
Yeah.
With the understanding that everybody in your life is part of your life and we're kind of all in this together. And
I love that part.
We have to kind of live for one another and stuff like that. It really kind of spoke to me. And his zeal for life and things like that, and his obviously colorful personality and the joy he brought to everybody else, it's just a real shame to see him go. But he obviously made the world a better place than he found it, and that's all any of us can ask for, I think.
His documentary on ESPN last year, I think last year, was excellent in my view. And it was a lot of guys. In fact, I saw a bit. It's not new, but I think the day or so after he passed, with Charles Barkley and Ernie Johnson and all those guys on the NBA crew, and exactly that. In that he talked about how he'd send text messages to post and basically thanking people for their contribution to him, as opposed to that. And God love the ones that had to work with him at time, Dan Schulman and others, but they had a lot of fun, and he was, you never knew. I know there were some people that didn't like, I understand, and watching those Pac-12 games late at night sometimes when he was doing those games that they didn't like because he wasn't a purist or he was out in left field, but his out in left field comments got you to think about some things too as well.
Right. Let's be honest here. If you're living in Indiana and you're or wherever you are, assuming you're not a fan of one of the two schools playing in that Pac-12 game, and you're up at 2:00 in the morning watching Arizona State play Oregon State, come on now. You need to be entertained.
And he did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did that very well. So, all right, well said. We will put an end to this. Now we got 4 questions, maybe 5 questions. So that lowers that per minute question quotient, I should say.
Well, I have some questions for our viewers.
Yeah.
If you're watching this on YouTube, have you liked and subscribed?
Okay.
If the answer
that's
is
one.
no, it needs to become yes.
Yes.
If you're listening to this on our many podcast platforms, have you left us a 5-star review and a productive comment? If the answer is no, it needs to be yes. Have you visited GoldandBlack.com and considered subscribing to our site? If not, subscribe to our site. If the answer is no, we'd very much appreciate it if that answer became yes. There you go. How about how I turn that? How about
now you're down to about
tables
3.5 minutes of it, and that's good. And also, if you're watching on YouTube, you just look at the bottom too. There's a lot of those links that you can, like Brian just mentioned. Please consider doing that. Brian Neubert's work, Tom Dienhart's work, Mike Carmen's work from time to time, Jordan Jones on down the line. We are proud of the work that.
Let me run you through the list of people I interviewed this week. Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
That I never had time to sit down and write this week. Matt Painter, PJ Thompson, Paul Lusk, Braylon Mullins, Trent Sisley, Courtney Moses, who is training Trey Kaufman-Renn the past couple months, Trey Buchanan, who's the son of Pacers president. I'm spacing on his first name. Yeah, he played at Westfield for 2 years with Braden Smith. So for a big feature I'm going to do at some point on Braden Smith, I've got stuff from him. Purdue had team camps all week. There were all-star games with recruits going on all week, so I was out and about and not necessarily at my computer writing. I know everything there is to know at this point about Purdue basketball heading into practice. We're going to have a ton of stuff on Tuesday. We're going to have a ton of stuff throughout the week. We're going to have a ton of stuff on Monday. So if you're interested in all this granular, nitty-gritty stuff about who's playing what position and how they're going to run their offense, how they're going to run their defense, you are going to get that on our site. Trust me.
It's Chad Buchanan, by the way, the general manager. He's only
I was thinking Pritchard. That's Kevin, right?
Yeah, Kevin Pritchard, but Chad Buchanan only 4 or 5 years older than you, so you could still have time to be the GM.
Sitting about 8 feet from him the other night, and I couldn't remember his first name.
Yeah. Well,
now, if I could watch the Pacers on television locally, all this stuff would be top of mind for me.
Yeah. Hard to do though, and
impossible to do.
And
for now, anyway. Hopefully that changes here soon.
Yeah, and we did find out in the playoffs they can score the ball. We knew that throughout the course of the year. A lot of fun to watch, to say the least. So, all right, we're landing the plane here. I want to thank the Union Club Hotel.
We crashed the plane long ago.
Union Club Hotel, again, the Travel and Leisure, the only hotel property in the state of Indiana to make the Travel and Leisure 500 list. That's quite an accomplishment for Vicki Wicks and that entire staff there. And for Brian Neubert, who's now frequented the 811 Bistro.
Making you significantly fancier and classier, by the way.
Yes, I think you've stepped up your game a long way. And it's a great spot over there. We thank them. We'll be back with more of this stuff next week. We may talk a little bit of football as well. But we'll look forward to that. Have a great week, everyone. Remember to answer every question that Brian asked. And if you do that, you'll be a subscriber to GoldandBlack.com and liking us on every platform. We appreciate that too. So have a great rest of your week, everybody, and we'll look forward to when we see you again.